Hello, everyone, and welcome to Health and Happiness at Work. This podcast is for busy working adults trying to figure out how to better take care of themselves and others. My name is Katie, and I will be your host. We are here today because adulting is hard and because busy working adults spend more time at work than anywhere else. We're going to have real conversations about real life and, most importantly, swing into action on the biggest opportunities. We're going to talk about ways to layer health, fitness, and wellness directly into your workday so that you feel fantastic. I cannot wait to dive deeper into each of these topics related to health and happiness. You are not alone. All right. Welcome, new listeners, and welcome back to my returning audience. This is Katie here with Season 2 of Health and Happiness at Work. This is a podcast, obviously, fully dedicated to supporting the well-being of working adults everywhere. And this episode in particular is going to highlight what to expect in the season ahead. And I'll go on to explore the concept of integrative wellness. So I'm really excited to share with you what this model of well-being looks like and how it might positively shift your perspective on where to begin or focus your efforts. So before we head that direction, I thought I would tell you a little bit more about the vision for the podcast, especially if you were not tuned in to Season 1, and that's totally fine. Glad you're here. Let me tell you a little bit more about why health and happiness at work. I see health and happiness at work as a double entendre, meaning we can interpret it a few different ways. Being used in a literal sense, meaning that we are speaking directly about layering health, fitness, and well-being into your work day and your workplace as an individual and as a workplace culture. So more on that in a minute. Health and happiness at work is also used figuratively. So health and happiness at work in your life, working for you, not against you. Many people really wrestle with so many things, right, related to health and well-being, getting started, staying motivated, getting the results they're after, navigating different seasons of life. And so what I love about what I do and my Business Wellness Collective is we really step into so many different work days and work lives and help people to figure it out and help workplaces to shape healthier workplace culture so that the workday is set up for success so that people can take care of themselves and ultimately love where they work. We'll also touch on health and happiness at work in our communities. So that's a space I'm stepping into more consistently, and that feels really fun and good too. So more on community well-being headed your way as well. So who might be listening to this podcast? Ultimately, I feel that I am speaking to busy working adults. I don't care how many hours a week you work, or maybe your work is at home. But generally, I am stepping into work days, workplaces, corporations, different institutions, organizations, so many different types of workday and workplace. So I am just really familiar with that audience, right? People who are potentially at work more than they are at home, Monday through Friday or whatever schedule it is. This podcast is also for those who are navigating healthcare and self-care, right? They're two different things. So healthcare meaning making it a priority to get to the doctor, to get to your preventative visits, to manage whatever it is that needs managed, right? There can be chronic diagnoses, there can be challenges that are ongoing, and rather than avoiding that, really leaning into it and making space for it in your life. And then also navigating self-care. How are you pouring back into yourself to take care of yourself? This podcast is also for people who are not only working and responsible for their own health care and self-care, but maybe that of others, right? So it only gets compounded when you're a parent or a caregiver. There are other people expecting some support from you or relying on support from you. And so I anticipate many of us want to be in that caregiving role, but how do we wear so many different hats and support ourselves along the way? This is for people who are navigating different seasons of life, as I like to call it. Life changes. Surprises happen, difficulties happen, adversity happens. You have different demands. Another word for demand is stress, but demand sounds way better, I think. I have a lot of demands on me right now. So, if you fall into any of those categories, I do believe that this podcast and the topics will be supportive to you. But I also want to mention another audience. My business, Wellness Collective, is really focused on supporting employers. So what's new in season 2 is I do intend to speak more to the workplace and to employers. And so what does this mean? So I could be speaking to business owners. I'm speaking to chief people officers, chief human resource officers, other leadership, directors, managers, supervisors, anyone who is responsible for a team. I really am setting out to provide insights and encouragement for ways that you can support groups as well. And so maybe you're supporting your family, maybe you're supporting your community, but I anticipate that many of you listening who are busy working adults are also in a role that you can positively impact and support others because of the nature of your title and work life and responsibilities. So we'll be talking about individual health and well-being, but then also group or community health and well-being. All right, so here's a little bit more detail on how this season will unfold a little differently than last season. So I'll call this the housekeeping moment. So last season was my first go at this, and I had a really great time. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy being in the studio here. And it was kind of a pilot season. We recorded them all at once and dropped them all at once with the theory that, hey, if you really liked it, how about binging it? How about you listen to them all one after the other if you're really enjoying it? And so this season, we're taking just a slightly different approach. And again, business is all about learning and testing and trying different things and seeing what works and what's the win-win. So what's been decided for this season is that we'll actually be recording and releasing monthly. And the cool thing about that is that I can be a little bit more responsive to content that's created and pushed out based on your feedback. So if you comment and you give me feedback either online or directly to my inbox, Katy, Katie at wellnesscollective.com, or you're a friend or family member or BFF, you can tell me what you think. And I can take those insights and that feedback and actually use it to curate and cultivate and write content based on that. So that's pretty cool. I call that working organically, responding to what's actually happening versus what I think will happen. And so that's a nice way to work, and that kind of fulfills the creative in me. So with that, look for these new episodes to drop at the end of each month on the fourth Friday. But again, you could be stumbling upon this at any point in time. And that's the pretty cool thing about media is you can digest this in whatever way you like. All right, so what specifically will we be diving into in the coming months? Well, I can promise you that we will continue to explore relevant and trending topics related to health and well-being. But again, it's going to be a slightly expanded lens. In the first season that I recorded, I really did focus on individual action items. What can you as a busy working adult do, choose to do, learn from in efforts to prioritize your health and well-being? And so my intention with that was twofold. That was my first go with a podcast. But secondly, we were and still are navigating a different workday, right? Pandemic times, I felt like people needed to pour into themselves and really prioritize health and well-being differently with work from home and other challenges. So, we're not totally on the other side of that. But I think now is perfect timing for me to expand the conversation to really my full wheelhouse, which is organizational health and well-being. So looking at groups of people and how can we really build amazing workplace culture, amazing communities, collaborative and supportive communities, and connection. And so again, a slightly expanded lens this season. Today, I'm really excited to kind of wrap up the housekeeping and shift into the topic of integrative wellness. You may be familiar with this term, you may not. If you are familiar with this term, I do anticipate that I might unpack it in a slightly different way than you've heard it explained before. Let's talk briefly about the word integrative. So whether we are talking about medicine, healthcare, or well-being, the word integrative is used to describe an approach that really focuses on the whole person. And it takes into consideration that there are many driving factors, many variables that impact a person and the experience that they're having. So a traditional experience in medicine or healthcare might lead you to a diagnosis, which is helpful. You know what condition you have or you're navigating, and you're potentially given a treatment. And for some people, that will be supportive, but there are other conditions, situations, experiences where people feel frustrated and people will ask the question, well, why? Why do I have this experience? And so integrative healthcare or medicine will start to look at a number of different pieces of the puzzle, and will look at lifestyle practices and, again, other drivers that could be considered to produce a better or different outcome. So integrative well-being is looking at the whole person. And, rewind a couple of decades ago when I first started working in this industry, and I would say wellness was a pretty narrow topic in the sense that wellness was really used to describe exercise and nutrition. And then maybe it was a little bit of know your numbers, what's your blood pressure? And quit smoking. And now I'm super jazzed and inspired and passionate about what I do because it has expanded so much more to really look at so many different domains of wellness that are all working together to, again, shape the person and their experiences. So that's where we're going to head next, is I'm really going to talk to you about a model of well-being. And gosh, there's a few different words I can choose to use, but I like the word domains of wellness because of the definition. I think I said this in season 1, but in college, my very favorite class was linguistics. I love words and I love researching them and understanding the roots and where they came from and the utilization and all of that. So the word domain means a specified sphere of activity or knowledge. So as I'm describing these domains of wellness, think of them as layering, one on top of the other, and them working together in partnership. And as I explain these, I think this will begin to make just a little bit more sense. So when we look at integrative wellness, there are 5 domains that I want to share with you today. Now, typically people mention 4, and those are mind, body, spirit, and environment. But I'm actually including a 5th, which is community. So let me walk you through this and why I feel so compelled that these 5 all work together and that they work together really well. And it's my hope that you'll consider these 5 domains of wellness when you are reflecting on your own life and experience and supporting others as well. So the first and second domains are mind and body. Many people try to separate these, but in my experience, that is just not possible. There is such a strong relationship between mind and body, and there are a number of healthy habits that we can lean into that in turn will benefit both mind and body, not just one or the other. So when we think about the relationship, it is so strong, and I think people underestimate that or maybe forget it because it's so familiar that you sort of overlook it. So here's an example. The mind is so powerful, you can have a thought. And maybe that thought is about something that worries you. Maybe it's a fear you have. Maybe it's public speaking. I'll use that because it's a common example. And so someone can have the thought about public speaking or getting on stage and speaking and instantly start sweating. Now, they're just thinking about it. They're not even actually doing it. But the mind is so powerful, and the central nervous system does its thing behind the scenes. And so you start to have this physical experience based off of a thought. And all of this is anticipatory. It's not really happening. You're just thinking about what if it happened. And so because the mind is so powerful, we actually have that experience of the thought. This can work against us. This can work for us. I just use it as an example to demonstrate the mind-body connection. You know, the mind is also powerful in helping us to heal if we have positive thoughts. There's just a number of really interesting studies on this. And so I invite you to think about these two domains of wellness being inseparable and working together, and knowing that there are so many different healthy habits that will benefit both. Next, we're talking about number 3, which is spirit. Oh, this is where it gets interesting, right? How do we talk about spirit? How do we define spirit? How do we talk about spirit in the workplace, right? So this could get interesting. Now, personally, I am a spiritual person. There are people who identify as spiritual, people who identify as religious. So how do we navigate this at work? Well, what I encourage people to do in this instance is to think of spirit as that spark or that essence that makes you you. And I like to think of a couple of phrases that I think resonate. You've probably heard the phrase, lift your spirits, right? The term or phrase, lift your spirits, gives the sensation or the imagery of someone feeling lifted up, maybe an experience of hope or positivity. I even picture like pep in the step. So for me, spirit in the workplace can speak to morale. It can speak to engagement and energy and enthusiasm. Now, spirit can also speak to spirituality or religion or whatever higher power or purpose you identify with. But I think if we come back to how are we supporting someone's spirit, their energy, their mood, their unique spark that makes them them, that's pretty powerful. You know, what can we do as individuals or groups to lift the spirits and support the spirits of others? And the spirit piece, that spark, that essence, it's the unseen part, right? But it's that unseen part that's really, really powerful and can absolutely impact or shape how somebody experiences their day and their life. So we can support spirit in a number of ways, and we'll be exploring that in the coming months. Next, let's talk about environment. So the 4th domain is environment. Environment typically refers to your surroundings. And what we know is that surroundings shape behavior. When we think of health and well-being, environment can actually be interpreted 2 different ways. So we have our external environment, the surroundings that we find ourselves in, and those are shaping behaviors and choices, whether we realize it or not. And then we have an internal environment, which is actually our bodies, housing mind, body, spirit. And that internal environment needs care and attention as well. So just to give a little further example, the environment that you find yourself in, as I mentioned, can absolutely impact you, right? We've all been in a toxic environment. We've all been in a cluttered environment. We've all been in an environment that doesn't lift us up. It weighs us down. And this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I meet a ton of people in health coaching who feel distracted or burdened or weighed down by the stuff in their life, and their environment is working against them, not for them. Even with something like drinking more water. There's evidence that if you see water in your environment, you will consume more water. So the environment is incredibly powerful for triggering behavior and choices. Now, when we look at our internal environment, our bodies, the body likes what's called homeostasis. So when we talk about homeostasis, it refers to the internal environment of the body, and it also refers to the body functioning at its optimal best. And when the body experiences homeostasis, it functions really well, right? Your body gives you feedback all day long, right? We've got a lot of different systems in the body. And if one of your systems isn't functioning normally or isn't functioning in a way that it used to, tune into that. So we'll be exploring environment as we go as well. So thus far, we've looked at mind, body, spirit, and environment. And as promised, there's a fifth that I'm including, and that is community. So how do we define community in this sense? For me, community speaks to the places you hang out, the people that you surround yourself with, the people that you choose to hang out with socially, the groups of people you choose to connect with over a common area or interest. I'm sure we can all think of a number of different communities in which we hang out, right? And so for me, community is incredibly important for health and well-being because it can support life satisfaction. It can support feeling connected to the community. It can speak to giving back or contributing to the greater good. It can support someone in feeling connected and socially supported. And so what we know is that a basic human need is that sense of not only safety, but belonging. And so community and leaning into cultivating community, either in the workplace or the home or where you live, is going to support you in that way of feeling engaged, connected, and again, this sense of belonging. Super, super powerful. So we've taken just a brief tour of this model, right? So I want you to visualize these domains as not independent moving parts or pillars, but as overlapping spheres. So I invite you to picture mind, body. I invite you to picture spirit layered over that. I invite you to picture environment layered over that. You have your external and internal environments. And I invite you to picture community layered over that. So we have these different layers that all work together. And why is this important or why is this beneficial? Well, this integrative model will support the whole person. And sometimes when people are working to quote unquote be healthier, there's this feeling of overwhelm or this feeling of, gosh, I hear this all the time. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not that enough. I'm this, I'm that, and some really devastating self-talk that really brings someone down based on a past experience or a past barrier or failed attempts. And people kind of, unfortunately, throw their hands in the air and abandon whatever the healthy habit or goal is. And so what I appreciate about this model and thinking of health and wellness in this way is it gives you a different lens to look through and to say, you know what? I've tried losing weight. It's hard losing weight. I'm frustrated. Okay, fine. Let's come at it from a different angle. Let's work on some other domain that is likely to help your weight loss in the end anyway, but we can come at it from a different starting point. That's what I think is really cool, is I think sometimes people feel stuck and they've exhausted their options or they're frustrated with their experience or outcome. But we have so many different options for this process of wellness in terms of places to start. We get infinite restarts. I don't know if you knew that, but you get infinite restarts in your life. If you're frustrated with something, we can begin again. This is kind of an impromptu message I hadn't planned on today, but one thing that keeps me going when I'm frustrated with myself or a choice that I made is like, hey, I can begin again. I can begin again the next meal. I can begin again the next morning. I can begin again at any point in time. And that is incredibly empowering. It reminds you that you have agency and you have this ability to choose and think differently at any moment in time. So we have infinite restarts and we have infinite paths or avenues we can take to help lift ourselves up and get after our goals and to feel better and all of that. But it doesn't have to look one way, and it doesn't have to look like you're even focused on that particular thing. I gave the weight loss example, but maybe you're frustrated because you have no energy and it's hard to exercise when you don't have energy. So there are infinite ways we can support energy. Maybe it is sleep. Maybe it is you need more brain breaks in the day. Maybe it is nutrition. Maybe it is hydration. You're probably dehydrated. There's so many different opportunities to begin again, try a different approach. And I think this model is a nice reminder that we have so many different ways that we can come at it. These domains also give a really powerful lens for self-assessment, right? So if you're reviewing what stays, what goes, how am I feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc., you can self-assess by these different domains. You can say, okay, mind, body check-in. What is going on with my mind and body? What is the biggest opportunity to support mind and body? For some people, it's meditation. For some people, it's sleep. For some people, it's managing a disease or diagnosis. For some people, it is relationships. For some people, it is communication and how they respond to stress. So there are infinite ways we can reflect on mind and body and what would have the biggest impact on life in terms of mind and body. So use that as a self-assessment question. What does my mind body need and what would have the biggest impact? You can self-assess with environment. What's going on in my environment? What's my experience of that? Is my body giving me any signs or symptoms? Is my external environment lifting me up or weighing me down? These are just simple coaching questions and assessment questions to kind of check in. Spirit, how are you feeling from the inside out? This can speak to motivation. This can speak to passion and purpose and connection and hope. Spirit can be defined so many different ways, but if your experience of spirit is you're feeling kind of meh, we can work on that. We can help you to feel supported in that way, but check in with yourself. How is my spirit? How is my mood? How is my passion and purpose? And, am I feeling inspired and engaged with life or the opposite? And finally, community, self-assess. Do I feel a part of something? And if you don't feel a part of something, that's okay. We can work on that. Some people are more introverted by nature, but that doesn't mean that you wouldn't benefit from a community that has common interests. It doesn't mean you hang out with them 24/7 and you're attached at the hip. It just means you have a group to engage with when you want to and receive support from when you want to. So I offer up this as a self-assessment tool to say okay, little life check-in. How are these feeling? And where might I want to pour a little attention? We only have to pick one thing to work on. P.S. I think that's the most radical thing I see is that when someone has a little motivation, intrinsically or extrinsically, it's like these 50 things are going to change on Monday. And you know what? That's just not really sustainable. So pick one thing, trusting that all these domains have the potential to improve because of that interrelationship by focusing on just the one thing. And then finally, my encouragement with this information today is to consider mind, body, spirit, environment, and community when you are working to support others, when you're working to support your family, when you're working to support your significant other, when you're working to support your colleagues, when you're working to support teams or hundreds or thousands of employees. If the environment isn't healthy, if people don't feel psychologically safe, that is a bad situation, super high risk, right? So as decision makers and leaders and influencers, we can consider the mind, body, spirit, environment, and community of the group. How can we pour into that? And the benefit of that is you never know what someone needs and what they might choose to engage with. So you might have a wellness program and you're trying to get everybody exercising, get everybody moving because they sit all day at work. Well, guess what? There are people that feel self-conscious. There are people who are terrified to step in a gym. There are people who can't exercise because some of their body parts are in pain. So they might say, I'm not going to participate. I'm going to check out. I'm going to be quote unquote disengaged, which is every employer's worst nightmare. Nobody wants disengaged employees. We want everybody participating in everything. But guess what? People need different places to start. So that employee that sits all day and doesn't have a lot of confidence and has chronic pain might not be able to join the fitness challenge. But guess what? You might have a volunteer opportunity or a fundraiser or a meditation class or a special interest group or a book club, and they would be totally into that, So we can engage and support people by making sure there are diverse opportunities for people to get started, because everybody has a different first step and it will feel safer for some people to start in a different place. So with that, I am super excited to continue the conversation around health and happiness at work, in your workplace, your workday, in your life, in your communities. And I will be back next month to continue the conversation. Thanks for tuning in today.